Hello chess friends and welcome to the channel. Today is round 5 of the Tata Steel 2019. Other two decisive matches were played in this round, other two great games that we can watch together. Carlsen is back behind the leaders, Nepomniachtchi and Ding, that today was able to win against Samuel Shankland. The game that I'm going to show you first is Foreest versus Carlsen, and I'd say that we can start directly with the game. Foreest with the white pieces opens the game with e4 and Carlsen answers with c5, the Sicilian defense. Knight to f3, knight to c6 and d4, the open Sicilian. C capture on d4, knight recaptures on d4 and knight to f6 attacking the pawn. Knight to c3 defending the pawn, and here comes e5, the Sveshnikov Sicilian like in the World Championship against Caruana. The knight is under attack and moves to b5 with the idea to jump on d6 with check. Black must avoid at all costs this solution, and in fact Carlsen plays d6. Now, with the pawn protected by the queen and the bishop, the knight can't jump on d6 anymore. In the main line, White continues with bishop to g5 pinning the knight, but both in this game and in the World Championship match, Foreest and Caruana, they play something different. They play the second most played move, knight to d5. This pair of knights, so advanced and also targeting c7, are dangerous, and so Black will capture one of these knights. Knight captures on d5 and he recaptures on d5. Now Black knight is under attack, and the two main alternatives are to move the knight to b8 or to e7. In the World Championship match, Carlsen used both of these lines, but at the end, in the last games of the match, he used to play knight to e7, and this is what he plays today against Foreest. Sorry. Knight to e7. Now c4, adding a new protection to d5, and if the knight on b5 must go back, now it can move to c3 without blocking the pawn. Knight to g6 and queen to a4, indirectly attacking the king and threatening a double check with knight captures on d6. Carlsen plays bishop to d7 and now queen to b4 with both the knight and the queen attacking d6, only protected by the bishop on f8. Of course, also this queen move breaks the pin. This queen maneuver, if now Black moves the bishop to f5, that is very good square for the bishop, with only one downside, that is after bishop to f5 Black can't push the f-pawn, but if Black moves the bishop to f5, where the bishop stands very good, and also opens the defensive action of the queen to protect d6, all this maneuver sort of gained one tempo for White, because Black was forced to bring the bishop from c8 to b5 in two moves instead of one. In game 12 of the championship match, this is what happened, but in the second game of the blitz phase, Carlsen made something different, and this is what he plays today. Instead of bishop to f5, he plays queen to b8, and now the queen is protecting d6 from b8. Here comes h4, h5, like in Caruana versus Carlsen, bishop to e3, and a6 hitting the knight. Knight goes back to c3, but here comes a new move. Instead of a5, queen to b3, a4, and queen to d1, instead of this line, after knight to c3, Carlsen plays f5. The idea is clear, is to push again the f-pawn, hitting the bishop on e3. I have two games in database with this position. The most significant one is from 2002 between two international masters. This position White played g3, controlling f4, and after bishop to e7 and bishop to e2, if Black keeps pushing, after f4, instead of capturing first, bishop to b6, then the next move White can castle long, and the Black kingside structure is a bit weaker than before, and white has good attacking possibilities. Van Foreest, instead of g3, after f5, he plays long castle. That is a perfectly fine move order, but Carlsen doesn't keep pushing. He plays more careful, and he develops the bishop to e7. Now g3, like in the line that we just watched. Short castle for black, and bishop to e2 with white that completes his development, and the bishop is attacking h5, and white stands a little bit better. Here comes e4. White can capture the h-pawn, of course without problems, but also for the computer, this pawn doesn't give white so much. Van Foreest is of the same idea, and because Magnus is starting to maneuver in the center, because this pawn advance also open the e5 square for the knight, he thinks that it's better to improve his pieces, and this is a perfectly fine idea. He plays bishop to d4, controlling this diagonal. Magnus Carlsen plays bishop to a6. Both players wanted to control this important diagonal, and the only possible finale for this story is that the bishop will be changed. Bishop captures on f6 and rook recapture on f6. Again, white can capture on h5, and again, no one cares about this possibility, neither the computer. But Van Foreest concentrates his efforts on his queen, because his most powerful piece is a bit restricted here on the queen side. So he thinks that it's better to improve her position. But where to move her? Van Foreest chooses an interesting path, queen to b6, with the idea to later go back to the center to d4 or e3. Here comes knight to e5, king to b1, bishop to e8, and rook to d2. For the computer, black equalized the game and has a little advantage, but these little changes in the computer evaluation don't really have to guide our judgment, because the position looks really equal. Knight to d7 with the knight back attacking the queen is nothing terrible for white, because the queen really wanted to move to the center, and Van Foreest moves the queen to d4. Maybe it was a bit better to bring the queen to e3, but nothing special. Also, Carlsen improves his queen and moves her to c7. And now it comes a short maneuvering phase where Carlsen will gain some little advantages move by move until there is nothing to do for white. Really a strange position. Van Foreest plays knight to d1. Here comes knight to e5. Sorry for so many arrows, but this knight in this position is really dangerous, because it had one attack to the c4 pawn. Of course, the pawn is defended twice, but also there is this possibility, in case of the bishop moves from this diagonal, there is the possibility of the knight fork on f3. So with so many threats, and with this knight control in the center, white position suddenly start to look a bit cramped. Van Foreest continues with the knight maneuver, and he plays knight to e3, but this knight relocation to e3 is probably the only mistake of the game, because Carlsen now can attack the knight with f4, and this is exactly what he does, f4, and after the two he changes, g capture on f4 and rook captures on f4. Now, with the rook, Carlsen gains control of this important f-file, attacking this pawn. Van Foreest plays rook to g1. He doesn't protect the pawn, because when the second rook will come to the f-file, when the second rook will move to f8, there will be nothing to do for this pawn, so he prefers to put the rook in a more active position. Here comes bishop to g6, guarding from far the king, but the most important idea is to free the rook. So later Carlsen will be able to move the rook to f8. King to a1 maybe is a tempo loss, because it's difficult to open this line. And here comes rook to f8. Now black pressure on the f5 is becoming really important. Van Foreest tries a counter-attack on the other side with c5, but this move doesn't scare Carlsen, that captures on f2. Here comes queen to c3. In this position, queen captures on c5, queen captures and d captures on c5. Carlsen is 2 pawn up, the pawn that was on f2 and this pawn, this c pawn. Van Foreest plays d6 because this is the only good element that he has at his disposal, the pass pawn. But here comes king to h7, not to avoid any check because it seems that the diagonal is protected, but because now the king from h7 is defending the bishop, and so the knight is free from his defensive position. d7, but here comes knight to f3, that ends the game. Van Foreest resigns, because what to do now? The bishop can't capture the knight because he's pinned. Because if bishop captures, white lose the rook. And not only lose the rook, but also the rook goes behind the pass pawn. And if the pawn promotes to queen, here comes rook captures. Rook captures, but it's possible now to capture the rook, but even better is rook captures on e2 and 2 pieces are under attack. It's already -9 for black. So another fantastic win for Carlsen, a real Sicilian master, but where did Van Foreest really lost this game? Probably with that knight maneuver, but my opinion is that it was black magic, like in the title. Our analysis is over, but this beautiful tournament has just started, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel. For now, thanks for watching and goodbye.